Mr. Frans Berkhout.
Okay, thank you very much. It's great to stand here today. Of course, it takes a long time before you get to this moment. In fact, I think a group of us has been working for maybe 3 years, 4 years trying to get here. But now, really, this is the start point, so it's great that we're here. Today, I just want to take a short moment to reflect on why have we made this institute here at the VU? Why have we brought these departments together? And the question is, why here, why now? Well, it's already been said that the Vrije Universiteit was a pioneer in doing multidisciplinary research on the environment, also the global environment, with this institute that IVM that I also direct, which has been in existence now 40 years. But it's also clear that we have world-class strengths in a whole range of fields here at the VU, in earth science, in ecology, in political science and spatial economics, but also in law, one of the faculties that the rector didn't mention, but who also are now involved in the Global Change Institute, is law. And also, of course, the VU's historic commitment to doing science for society. I think that's a very important motivation for the initial development of work and why these kinds of departments have looked at environmental and sustainability issues through all this long period. We have leading scholars here at the VU across a whole variety of disciplines in ecology, in economics, in law, in political science, in economics. So we have a really strong base from which to develop this new institute. We do world-class science. We publish in leading journals across a whole variety of different fields, which we now want to try to connect better in this new institute. And I think one of the great things about working on this project in the last 3 years is actually that there's a lot of commitment to that idea of interdisciplinary collaboration. Often people say it's very difficult and people don't understand each other and the languages are different. But actually what I feel in the room when I get together with people at this university is a great deal of commonality and drive to work together. We also have this existing leadership in global programs. So we have Frans Berkhout. Unfortunately, he's not here at the moment because he's doing a radio interview about this institute right now, but he should be here very, very soon. He leads the Earth System Governance project of the International Human Dimensions Programme, so that's really a leadership role that we have in agenda setting, the sort of thing the rector was talking about. And Peter Verburg, who from next year will become the chair of the Global Land Project, an IGBP, IHDP project on land and the development of land use globally. Now, why Amsterdam? Now, not only because we're at the VU, but actually Amsterdam in the history of the development of this new field of sustainability science. Amsterdam as a city plays a very important role because there's a pivotal conference in 2001 held in the Rai, which some of you may have attended, which actually really is the launch of sustainability science. And in 2001 there was a manifesto written, which I think is still very relevant today, although of course we have moved on. They argued that sustainability science brought together scholarship and practice. It was looking at global and local perspectives from the north and the south, binding things together, disciplines across the natural and social sciences, focusing on problems and looking at both the interaction between knowledge and action. And I think even 10 years on, that's still very much the basic agenda from which we're working, although of course in the last 10 years things have changed. Why now then, after 10 years, do we need to refocus and think again about what we can do as a university doing interdisciplinary research? I think the first thing is it's clear that in those 10 years, global change and sustainability challenges have become more urgent, and I'll give you some examples of that. The great acceleration, as some people call it. I think there's also, despite the many contests and conflicts in society around this, a much greater awareness in politics, business and society about these challenges, around the use of resources, around the use of environmental services. And also, I think what's changed is that far more is demanded of science by societies as these societies try to seek solutions or ways of navigating through the new problems that sustainability generates. Well, what's happened in the last 10 years? In the world, there are 1 billion extra people. Now, often in environmental debates, these are characterized as 1 billion or mouths to feed. I don't see it that way. Of course, these are 1 billion potentialities, people with new ideas about how to organize society, or organized in a more constrained world, but also forming new energy and potential for changing that world and thinking differently about it. 1 billion extra people in 10 years. The world gross domestic product has grown by about 36% in those 10 years. So the economy of the world has grown by a third. Enormous changes. And of course, much of this development based on the use of resources, raw materials. Crucially, the composition of that world GDP has changed. So we have in 2010 more or less parity between the three great blocs now, between the US, the EU and Asia. And that change in power relations, in the use of resources and environmental services, of course will be the thing that dominates the way in which we think about the governance of these problems in the future. I use this just to give an example of changes in consumption. Of course, one of the things that happens as people get richer is that they eat more meat. So in the last 10 years, the world has been eating a fifth more meat, 20% more meat. And meat is a very environmentally, heavy way of consuming calories and nutrients. And this will likely continue to grow in the future as well. World energy consumption has risen by a quarter. Again, these are huge numbers. In short periods of time, we're really transforming the way in which we're using resources, and that looks certain to continue into the future. Global CO2 emissions have risen by 20% in those 10 years. Atmospheric CO2, last month, the atmospheric CO2 concentration was 394.35 parts per million, and that's a growth of 7.1%. on the level in 2000, and there's no sign again of that changing. 9 of the 10 hottest years have been in the last 10 years. Some indicators are not as rapidly changing. So one of the surprises as I was looking for some of these indexes is this index on the Global Living Planet Index from World Wildlife Fund for Nature. And actually, in the last 10 years, that's been more or less flat. I don't quite understand the reason for that, but in some areas, maybe policy and governance is having its effect. And one of the underlying problems, of course, is still the inequality in the access to resources around the world. So this is a picture of access to clean drinking water, where red is bad and blue is good. So these inequalities also, I think, have increased actually in the last 10 years. And we have this greater awareness, I think, in society and in the media about what this means. So this is a cover from The Economist 2 weeks ago, where they announce the Anthropocene. It's a notion that was developed actually by Paul Crutzen in the late 1980s, but now has come into common currency. And the notion here is that we're in a geological time period which should be called the Anthropocene. It's different from the Holocene, where we used to think we were living in, a geological period of great stability, in fact. The Anthropocene is a new period because it's a period in which the Earth's systems are being remade, refashioned in really dramatic ways by human action. So we're really in a new phase in which we control many of the important nutrient streams, many of the important global environmental systems are in some way really influenced deeply by human action. And it's that relationship which we need to understand and seek to manage globally in some kind of way as well. So the signs are still mostly in the wrong direction, and transitions to sustainability still seem far away. Science may be contributing to awareness, but not yet really in a convincing way to the development of solutions to change. So what are the challenges now in this decade? I think the first challenge for our institute, which might have been different than an institute created 10 years ago, is that clearly the global financial crisis has made sustainability on one sense less relevant because people are more concerned with economic growth again, but on the other hand again more relevant because we know from commodity prices that actually the use of resources and the use of environmental services will be increasingly a constraint in the future. But underlying this, it means that the economic rationale for sustainability has really become fundamental. And that also must be one of the features of the work we do. And we can here at the VU because we have actually one of the strongest groups in Europe in the whole field of environmental economics. We've also seen, as I've suggested, a global shift in the human impact on global environmental systems. So the competition for resources will become globally much sharper, and this will lead to price increases, but also all sorts of new conflicts around the use of resources and environmental services. I think, very different from 10 years ago, our confidence in the capacity for global governance has fallen. The Copenhagen conference, now 18 months ago, is a sort of high point of realization of that. And therefore we're really looking for new approaches to globally governing resources and environmental services. And research here at the VU will play an important role in that as well. We're seeing, of course, in many fields, the role of the state in providing collective goods, whether it's culture or education, but also the environment, being completely redrawn. And therefore, we're really facing this important question about what is the role of the state, and can citizen action, the action of the market itself, bring the kind of radical changes, the transitions in production and consumption systems that we need or not. And again, I think as scientists we have an important role there. And fifthly, I think, as Marwit suggested in his opening statement, the role of knowledge and the authority of knowledge itself has changed. Science needs to be much more open in building knowledge about the environment and how we achieve sustainability. If we ever were in an ivory tower, and I don't think we ever were, we really can't be in the future. We must find a dialogue with all sorts of people and organizations who are producing knowledge, are actively involved in that. So what does that mean for our institute, these new challenges in this coming decade? I think the first thing is, of course, that we have to be broad in scope, and we have that because we have ecologists and environmental scientists and hydrologists and economists and lawyers, political scientists, all working together now, because we're trying to put together this complex and evolving puzzle of global change. We need to work across scales, so understanding at the cellular level what is happening, but also trying to make the link to changes at the global scale. We need to be integrative in new ways, because although 10 years ago the announcement of sustainability science was a good thing, and of course a lot has happened, there's still a long way to go. And I think in the practice, in creating this institute, where we can be a sort of model, actually, in Europe but also internationally, for how that might take place. And fourthly, of course, we need to engage with many stakeholders, opening up a dialogue, listening carefully to what society wants from us, and trying to deal with the questions which are relevant to them. So what are we trying to do in this new institute? I think we want to capture the full scope of the research power that we have here at the VU. We want to integrate that in a new way, in interesting new ways that are societally relevant, and thereby have greater impact, not only in science, but also in helping provide society with the dialogue, with the tools, the conceptual tools, the analytical tools, and perhaps the instruments also, for achieving sustainable choices.